Welcome to ETMA Tech Talk, the podcast that unveils forces shaping the future of tech. In each episode, we bring together visionary leaders, forward-thinking innovators, and game-changing experts who are transforming the enterprise tech landscape. Listen to insider perspectives, dive into bold stories of digital transformation, and strategic breakthroughs that turn challenges into competitive advantages. Whether you're looking to scale disruptive innovations, navigate the evolving tech landscape, or explore the latest in AI, technology expertise management, IT services and consulting, cybersecurity, and other technology challenges, this podcast is your key to mastering the future of technology. Here is your host, ETMA's Managing Director, Joe Basili.
Welcome. If you've been using scripting or traditional RPA tools to automate workflows on vendor portals or SaaS applications but keep hitting roadblocks like CAPTCHA, CDNs such as Cloudflare and Akamai, or you're struggling with multi-factor authentication and a perpetual slew of other challenges, then this episode is for you. Imagine, if you can for a second, the most tedious and repetitive web-based tasks in your enterprise simply disappearing. Today, we're diving deep into automation, not just as a buzzword, but as a real practical game changer. Our two guests first teamed up to launch eMovis, an innovator in the enterprise mobility management space. They scaled and successfully exited to a $9 billion private equity firm, and eventually it was sold to Tango or merged as part of Tango. Joining us today, our co-founder and CEO of Weeldi, who first launched his very first company at age 21. Also, we have co-founder and CTO, whose path towards entrepreneurship began from his lifelong love of technology, first publishing programming books at age 16. So welcome, Mathieu, Guilmineau. And let's get started. If we can, let's just talk a little bit about Weeldi and what does your firm specialize in?
Yeah, thanks for the great introduction, Joe. Appreciate it. Weeldi is a web automation company, no code, low code. So the premise is we enable operations personnel, the people that do the work every day, the people that understand the work, to be able to build and manage their own automations. And what Weeldi does is solve for all of the challenges that you run into automating on the web. So like you mentioned in the introduction, solving CAPTCHAs, getting past CDNs like Cloudflare, Akamai, which are becoming more common in the age of AI, multi-factor authentication, just the rabbit holes that people go through and then gives a recording tool to the customer so that they can build and manage their own automations without having to understand any type of software development.
And, the question that everybody's thinking about today with AI, ChatGPT, and Agentic AI, why can't you just use that to automate your processes and get your invoice billing data and process transactions?
Yeah, I think if the real world was your world on LinkedIn, where you have all kinds of fantastic posts and demos, then you would most certainly be able to use Agentic AI to do the type of automation work that we do. LinkedIn has this fad of the fear and uncertainty of somebody's doing some miraculous thing somewhere else and you're not. I think we're here to tell you the reality is it's not ready just yet. AI is extremely valuable, but for a couple of reasons, it's not ready yet. So Agentic AI and AI in general, we still see a lot of hallucination with those solutions. So when you're doing the type of automation we're doing, like making payments or downloading important data, which could be sensitive data, you need to know for certain that what's going to happen at the output of that is what you expect to happen, right? So Agentic's not there yet to be able to deliver that type of certainty unless you're in a very contained environment, which then that kind of defeats the purpose of Agentic AI because it's supposed to operate in these environments that are less certain. That's the first piece, but we're watching it very closely, and we'll talk about, I think, a little bit later in this interview how we're leveraging and see our customers leveraging AI. But the second part is, how do you even get AI onto a website? So the type of websites that we automate on, vendor portals, SaaS applications, they have the protections in place that I talked about, the CDNs, the bot deterrence, the multi-factor authentication, the CAPTCHAs that would prevent AI from even getting onto those websites to be able to automate even if you wanted to utilize them. So that's the area where Weeldi focuses, is making sure that engine is in place where all the problems are solved that people typically run into when they automate on the web. So as AI catches up and you can push that magic button and agentic just works, using the Weeldi engine, you'll be able to get to those websites.
Makes sense. Speaking about just miraculous things, how do your automation tools work so well? Most often you hear about tools that work, but then in the real world conditions, they don't stick the landing. So how do you do it where others stumble?
So I think it has to do with our very narrow focus, and I'll let Mathieu chime in a second with this if you want to add anything in addition. But we are exclusively focused on web automation, right? So there's a broader space called RPA, or robotic process automation, which handles desktop automation and became very popular over the last few years with some big successes. But those tools were built specifically to automate on very contained systems that people controlled: healthcare, banking, things that haven't changed in 20 years. And it was a way to get information through those interfaces back into an API format so they can interact with other more modern applications. The reality is when you go out onto the web, you just run into a whole slew of different challenges, as you mentioned in the intro. And we deeply focus on those challenges. That's all we focus on. If you said, can you automate filling out a spreadsheet for me, or send an email, or completing a Word document, we don't touch that. The traditional RPA does. So we're just very deep and narrowly focused. However, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area because web automation is its own animal that needs that.
I'd say essentially we take a completely different approach from RPA, where RPA is desktop environment that does not change a lot. You control the updates, you control your browser on your desktop, but once you are on the web, all those browsing companies updating their browser every month, accelerating that, new protocols, new security layers, and changes on the websites that you don't control, but you still need to access those websites, no QA environment. So the approach that we must take in that case is looking at it like a human would, as opposed to a programmer or script would. And so basically, Weeldi is looking at websites like you would explain to someone standing next to you, as opposed to how you would program it into some traditional scripting language.
Are there particular market segments or customers that are in certain areas that are best for you?
Yeah, I think any market where there are processes that live on a website that are valuable but aren't available through API. In the room of ETMA and technology management, we see that with SaaS applications, with telecom providers, but we also see this in other spaces like utilities, shipping, environments where the vendors don't have APIs, or they hold them very closely, or they're incomplete, but the application providers that are helping manage those expenses or those processes would love to automate things that can be done back through that website. So you can go into your Verizon account and you can order a phone. You can go into your Verizon account, you can download a bill, you can go into Verizon, you can see real-time usage. However, if you want to do all that via API, it's a lot more complex. So our customers say, hey, how do I do that back through the website in that particular vertical? And what they're generally doing is they're having somebody, what we call swivel chair it. So they're doing it manually, right? Or they're using Python or traditional scripting to code it, and quickly that creates a whole bunch of challenges that they run into. Or they're using traditional RPA tools, which we talked about were designed for something very stable. Now they're in this very dynamic environment. So those aren't working out well. And we can come in, utilize our tool, allow them to automate those processes going right back through those websites, which are basically available to everybody on day one because all the customers have access to those websites. So something where they can get quick value out of it.
Great. And we've referred a little bit to no code or low code. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that means? And
yeah, I can take the no code because that's the simpler part, and I'll let Mathieu take the low code. There's more abstraction there. So one of the things that we learned in a previous business is that if you really want to be successful automating, you have to minimize the communication between software development and the people that understand the processes, because a lot of gets lost in that translation. And if we could empower the people that do the processes to actually build the automations, that would be powerful because they know what they need out of it. So that's the no code portion. We built what we call an automation studio. And it's a cloud-based browser where a user can come in and it basically walks them through holding their hand on how to build an automation. Every click, they have an image. It tells them what the intent was. If the intent is not clear, it asks them to clarify. And they're basically building in the same environment where the automation is going to run in production at scale. So they are downloading an invoice and they're going to do that for 1,000 customers. The place where they're building the automation is exactly the place where that automation is going to run at scale. They don't have to build something on a desktop and then put it in the cloud and then work out all the kinks between the two different environments, different networks, different operating systems, et cetera. So it allows them to build that by just clicking through exactly what they're doing and telling the automation what it wants to do. And then what happens is people do something and it works and it's easy, and then they want to do something more complicated. So I don't just want that invoice, give me the last 12 months invoices, or I want every invoice on this page. And that's where low code comes into play. And I'll let Mathieu talk about that a little bit more.
Essentially, the power and the limitation of the automation studio is you want to capture the intent, so you can replay the intent, not what was actually interacted with, but what the person intended to do, because the next time there will be different values on the screen, a different login, but you still don't want, you want to reuse the same recording. So capturing the intent, sometimes it's easy because you just record the mouse and the keyboard. Sometimes the intent is the eyes. You just visualize it, check, you validate that what you did is what you meant to do and what you selected on the previous page. Or sometimes automatically your mind, you change the format of dates, 0412. So all those things that happen also need to be captured and communicated. That's where low code comes in. If you plan to go through many pages, you don't want to record all those page clicks. You just want to say, go do the same thing on all those pages. And to convey that, you just have to use basic English language, but that's what we call low code. It's not a programming, it's more in plain English saying, repeat that for each of those rows. Do that as long as you have a next button, or convert that date from this format to that format. And for some light data transformation, AI actually, like an LLM system like ChatGPT, can produce that for you. So it's where actually you can use that as a coworker, as a more technical piece that can tell you how to convey that intent. But at the end of the day, that's still something you would be doing mentally, and you just want to convey that to the automation.
Yeah. I think Joe said simply is where things just become a little bit more abstract, and a click interface doesn't lend itself well to the interaction. You need to use some regular language, and we have our own syntax. So it's an entire language that we've created so that it's easier for everyday people to utilize it. Mathieu said, if you want to click, you type click. If you want to pull from each page, you type exactly that. It's very straightforward.
Great. So I imagine implementations are pretty straightforward then for you in terms of implementing new clients. And there's not a lot of custom coding and work that you have to do in getting a client up and running.
They are. More of the work is on the process side. So clients understanding their processes and understanding them at a level that can be automated. And the only real way to do that is have some documentation of a process and then start automating.
Interesting. So I imagine you find some clients have their processes really well documented and others not so much.
Yeah. There's a whole spectrum.
So what kind of impossible workflows have you automated that left your clients like speechless or just like, wow, we never thought we could automate that workflow?
Yeah, I think a lot of them, one of the ways we always joke about the ideal prospect for us is somebody that's deployed RPA, already tried to script, right? Because they've already experienced the burn of trying to do it with the existing tool set, versus somebody who hasn't tried it at all. They've never done anything and then they utilize your tools. Oh, that's how it always works. That said, a lot of our customers have failed RPA implementations or failed scripting implementations, and they come to us and they're able to solve that stuff back to our platform. One that jumps out to me in the shipping space is a big customer in the logistics management space. And they had a shipping provider where the automations are running nonstop. It's downloading data, memorized data, comparing data, only downloading the new data that appears. And it's something where they had a designated team focused on it. They couldn't figure it out. They came to us, and within a week, which was mostly teasing out the spec for what they needed, we're able to put that out there, and they've been utilizing that now for multiple years, and it works well for them.
Great. Any other real life anecdotes or deployment stories that you want to tell us?
I'd say nothing that jumps out different than the others. One thing that we do see with deployments is you generally have two ends of the spectrum where you either have somebody who has no process at all defined, and then they think by behind the automation tool, somehow that's going to make them be able to automate, right? So that is a learning curve and it takes a little bit longer time to value. We can get them there, but it's just a little bit more work. And then the other end is folks that have refined processes, but are just constantly refining and they're trying to get things perfect before they actually deploy. And what we find there is no matter how good your process is, no matter how well documented the process is, it's like the Mike Tyson quote boxing where everybody knows until they get punched in the face, right? That's automation. Everybody's process is great until they try to automate it. And then you find out how good it really is. It's not that it's bad, it's just you're learning new things. And as you add more scale, you learn new things. So it's finding that middle ground of you have a framework to start with, but then you get after and you start automating, you work with a partner like us that can iterate quickly with you so you can get to the result.
Yeah, everybody's got a plan till they get
punch in the face. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
everybody
sure.
has a process until they start automating.
So that's a good segue. I was going to ask you to tell us about a time when things didn't go as planned.
I'll hand that one to you, Matthew, since you oversee the technology. You probably have more interesting stories. Yeah.
My instant reaction to that is, things never go as planned. Like the day never goes as planned. You wake up, you have a plan. And no matter how well you prepare, customers use products in ever broader ways, so you always get surprised. They always push the envelope at how they use Weeldi. The web environment is very dynamic. There's a cadence of updates that increases all the time. There's new actors with the AI driving most of the traffic now to websites. Everything changes. AI can solve captchas. How you basically automate on the web is ever changing, and you just can't predict. You have to be ready with a large tool set, pretty sturdy engine, and provide as much visibility and control to customers so they can adapt and continue automating.
That's a great point. Billers are notorious for dropping a field or adding a field unannounced, and I'm sure you get a lot of bumps in the night with that, where somebody's got a workflow, they got it all figured out, and then boom, some change with the billing format or something.
It's all about resilience. Yeah, and the goal really is that those automations, they remain sturdy, and either they give you immediate and easy way to adjust, or they just sail through changes that are not meaningful. And yes, they would break a script, but they would not bother a person using the tool, and so they would not bother really automating through it.
So just switching gears a little bit, let's talk a little bit about applied AI and where you see its role in terms of what it could do for the space.
Yeah. So applied AI, as best I know, is a term that we just coined to start utilizing internally, right? There's a lot of hype around AI, as is with any powerful technology, and rightfully it's super powerful. However, what we try to focus on is utilizing not because they're popular or trendy, but because we actually see customers gravitating towards those things or having the need. So if you were to think about like most software applications, people built those software applications because they saw somebody doing a bunch of stuff in a spreadsheet and they said, man, if they're doing all this in a spreadsheet, there must really be a need to solve this problem. So we could put an application layer on top of that. We could make it easier to interact with the data, more powerful, et cetera. That's how we look at AI too. What are customers doing with AI already, right? Where we could incorporate that into our tool. Not let's incorporate it into our tool, let's build it, and we build it, the field of dreams, if we build it, they will come. That doesn't work really that well, especially in enterprise software. So what are they already doing? And in what we call applied AI is what we see and have seen our customers doing is taking a lot of the low code stuff that Mathieu mentioned, and I'll hand it over to you in a second, Mathieu, to elaborate on that, but utilizing ChatGPT and the like to be able to do some of that stuff in our system, because actually AI is very good at that type of stuff. And when we see the customer using it, then we know it's real, right? They went out there, they figured this out on their own. It's their spreadsheet. So then we say, okay, that's real. There's real value in it. They're doing it on their own. And then that's how we look at incorporating AI into our application. So we call that applied AI. It's already applied. It's in the real world. They're getting value out of it. We're not hoping or thinking in our world that it might be valuable. It's already been proven. And that's just a product focus approach that we have in the business, how we build the business. Mathieu, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, what we've seen a lot very early on is just complicated things like for people that are very simple for an LLM system. You want to find a way to say, get me that link from that email or get me that text from that page. And you need a simple pattern, like a regular expression. And that's something that's very machine-like. But if you have the least technical customers of ours that go to ChatGPT, never use any programming language, don't know HTML, but they know how to ask the question and they get their pattern just by copy pasting and seeing what they want. And LLM is super for that. So what we want to do is to then just integrate that within Weeldi and say you don't even have to copy paste stuff and ask the question. You're doing that, but we're going to make it even easier for you. And that's one example. Another one is a validation of their work. If you're doing some more abstract things, that's where AI, with a bit of guidance, because you can train AI with some additional context, say this is the right way to convey your intent. And then this is what the customer is actually trying to do. And this is what they come up with. Correct it. Say what's wrong with what they did. So AI is also very good as a second eye validation, which is basically if you had a coworker you're with who's going to, in pair programming, is going to look at your screen and say, you missed that, or I think this is incorrect. So we see AI really best assisting people who just are going to be saving time because they do things more accurately and more and faster.
So we touched on this topic at the beginning, but just to have you further amplify on it, and you're using the term applied AI, with all the tremendous advancements and applications of AI into the business world, it sounds like rather than seeing it as a competitive threat to your business, you're actually seeing it as what, an accelerant?
Yeah, I think we're in a good position because we're able to use it to augment the current process. But I think this is probably the position that most people are in. There's not going to be 100 OpenAI, ChatGPT type applications. Those are large language models. There's a lot that goes into that, including a ton of capital. There'll be a few of those, and then there's a lot of people that can leverage those to augment their tools. And I think the ones that are in the best positions are people that have tools that are solving problems today, and they can look at those problems they're solving and see where AI can reduce friction in solving those problems. And in this case, the low code component and some of the more abstract components of how you use our application is a place where we've just seen customers utilize it. We know it's real, and that's where we're working on connecting it back tighter into our application, because if they use it on their own outside of it, we know they'll use it when it's in our application.
What do you see as some of the biggest challenges facing this market segment today?
So I think AI is creating more challenges with web automation for folks, because as AI bots, if you will, right, are going out onto the internet and pulling data and doing all these different things, those people that have that content, right, whether it be a publisher or just anybody that wants to protect their content, or maybe not even just their content, it can just be purely infrastructure. You just don't want this stuff going across your infrastructure and consuming resources, are looking at ways to prevent this from happening. So what does that do for our customers? They're looking to automate on some of these same websites and do things that they're authorized to do, go get customer information. They get caught up in that mess and get blocked as well. And you have companies like Cloudflare that specifically are out there beating the drum and saying that, hey, every website needs Cloudflare, because if not, AI is going to be running across your website like crazy. That creates a challenge for folks automating the space. And we have a lot of people that reach out to us that they were previously successful. What they had was previously working, but in this new world, it's not working anymore. That shipping example I gave earlier was an example of that. It creates a challenge, but then what we always say internally is that challenge is our opportunity, right? Because if it was easy to automate on the web, then you wouldn't need Weeldi. You would just go use some open source tool to do it. But since it's not easy to automate on the web, and there's always these new challenges coming about, as long as we keep fixing these, then we're a need for people that need to solve this web automation problem.
That's great. So it sounds like you have this cop, if you will, that's preventing people. And it's not just a question of security, but it's also companies are really concerned about consumption of their network or consumption of the application that they put on the web, and bots are going to attack it. But now you've got AI and the ability to get access to information, and there's concerns. Well, hold on a second. We don't want you doing all that on our website. And so all of a sudden now it's blocked. Somebody had a workflow and a process that was automated, no longer works. It's broken down. Now they have to come to you and say, how do we get around this? We don't want to rehire people or have our people spend all this time doing manually what they used to do. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
What do you see like going forward, and what sort of things are you working on to harness new capabilities from AI, as well as just new things that you expect to see in the billing world?
So I think Matthew mentioned it before, more tightly integrating AI into our application for the low code piece. So we see people using it. We see that it's valuable. We see that they continue to use it. We don't want them to have to go to two applications, right, to check their work, like Matthew mentioned, or figure out how to transform a piece of data. So that's the next step for AI within Weeldi. That's what we're doing now and working on, so that we'll have that available to our customers, and they'll be able to do that just through one seamless experience to make that easier. That is less about AI. That's more about the progression of trying to make it as easy as possible for customers to build and maintain automations on our platform. It just happens to be that AI is adding enough value in that scenario. That's the chosen tool to solve the problem. What our ultimate vision is for the company is at some point, it will be very easy to say, type exactly what you want to happen, and it just happens, right? We're just not there yet. And the way we're working back from that is allowing people to be able to chip away or work towards that as much as they can iteratively until they can get to that part, or we get to the part and technology is caught up to the part where it's that easy. But we want to be there when it's available. So it's constantly keeping a pulse on the market, making sure that we understand what's happening. It's not cynical. We don't say AI doesn't work. We know it's powerful, it's huge, we're very well connected to it. But then it's having the focus and the discipline to implement it in ways that are going to be valuable.
Gotcha. Okay. Matthew, anything you want to add to that, or?
Regarding upcoming challenges and maybe with AI specifically on that, I think that, like we said, the increased protection that vendor websites must implement because AI being so invasive, that also means that now there's new ways of having to automate at scale, and you need to be coming from known and trusted sources. You need to have a secure and but also seasoned browsing environment where you don't look like a fresh blank slate, but you look like a normal user. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, really we want to continue looking like a normal human. That's, we believe, the main way to both in pace and in scale to look like a normal person accessing their data as opposed to a bot. And that the conditions for this continue to evolve, and we look forward to also see where AI can help with that, particularly in automatically selected and adjusting to those protections.
Great. Are there any other areas that we haven't touched on that you think are important to touch on for this?
Not specifically from my view. I'll just double down on the statement that I made earlier in terms of getting started with automation. It's one of those things where we talked about somebody having no process and then a highly refined process. It's something people have to look at doing because if they're not, obviously their competition is, and as their competition starts doing it, it becomes more difficult for them to compete. And things don't need to be perfect to get started. Having an idea, having a framework, a process, and then getting started, it actually is a lot faster than trying to get everything down perfect and then get started. I always like to reemphasize that because there are definitely folks that will delay that process thinking that there's something they'll be able to solve on a piece of paper that they're just not going to be able to solve until they get that live and start automating it.
Yeah, I think that's really profound what you said about this whole idea and what you're bringing out about workflow and how companies need to really be organized with what they're doing. But at the same time, you can go off on the deep end there, and then it can prevent you from moving forward with automation. It's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So both of you have started businesses. And Mo, when we were first talking about doing this podcast, you alluded to this idea of a little bit of a corporate philosophy that you have, if you will, a tension that you see between the idea of business value and headcount, and automation, I think, comes into play. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. When we founded this company back in 2019, Matthew and I, we always kind of had this hypothesis that software is meant to automate, it's meant to allow things to scale better. So we this was not pre AI, but pre AI being pre Open AI, Chat GPT, pre it being such a prevalent thing. The future software company is not going to be a ton of people. It's going to be highly efficient and very focused. And when we built this company, we didn't want to build it with a ton of people. We wanted to build it through that vein. And that influences exactly the applied AI piece that we talked about as well, is that it forces us for everything we do to really be focused, to scrutinize, to self-reflect, to make sure that before we actually put resources into something, that we can get our hands around it and it feels real, and we're not chasing those LinkedIn posts that I talked about in the front end, right? The fear and uncertainty of what somebody else could be doing. We have customers, our customers tell us what their problems are. And if we can build things that fix those problems and only focus on the things that are fixing problems, it allows us to be more efficient all the way through. And we don't do things that aren't profitable. So we are bootstrapped by design. We want it to be that way. And that forces us to make sure that the endeavors that we go down, not everything has to make money, but in general, the bigger picture has to be something that makes money. So we're not selling dollars for nickels, right? Where anybody can do that. If somebody is buying our service, we're making a profit margin on it. They've determined there's value by paying for it. And we feel like that's just more real and tangible. And that's the culture that we've built and we continue to build for the foreseeable future.
Gotcha. So is it how does the business model work for you? Is it a subscription model based on volume or what?
Yeah, so we have a subscription model. There's a base platform fee, was just our minimum cost for what it costs to support a customer. We want to make sure they're successful, so we put resources on that. And then with that base fee, they get an allotment of basically credits that allow them to be able to automate and run automations. And then after that, they just pay per use. So we wanted to have a very success driven pricing model where we don't force people into higher plans and higher plans. We just say, this is our base plan to be able to do business with you. You get an allotment, you exceed that allotment, and you pay for it. You use less, your bill goes down. So it just ebbs and flows based on usage. And we only bill or monetize situations where the customers determine it's a success. So when you build automation in our platform, you say, this would be a success, making a payment. If you go through that website and that website is down, or there's a problem and that fails and that payment's not made, you're not paying for that automation, only when it's successful. So we just really wanted to get aligned with our customer value as much as we could and make sure that our pricing basically matched how they perceive value.
Great. Speaking of customers, you're handling some pretty sensitive material from the standpoint of you're getting embedded into a company's internal processes, which can be pretty sensitive. And then also, at the end of the day, a lot of what you're doing is billing information, which again can be real sensitive. Are there any special certifications or things that you've got in place that give customers a sense of protection and security?
Yeah. And I would say that's probably one of, when you said the surprises early on in the business as we laid out our roadmap, you think about the basic compliance and attestations like SOC 2, Type 2, but you never expect them to evolve into what they've evolved into. And today we're PCI compliant, so certified with a complete report on compliance. The time we did it, I haven't checked back in on it. We're the only web-based automation solution that had that. So like UiPath, Automation Anywhere, those guys didn't have that level of PCI compliance with their solutions for automations. That's an incredibly comprehensive process. We do it because it holds us accountable to better security. It makes our customers more comfortable. And then we have SOC 2, Type 2, which is more standard in the industry. But we do take security serious because our customers take it serious, and that's a deal breaker. If you don't have that in place, it doesn't matter how good your tool is. They can't use you.
Gotcha. Okay. Very interesting. So you're probably the first, and maybe to this day, one of the only ones that have that level of compliance. Let's switch gears a little bit, talk a little bit about yourselves, get personal again. You talked a little bit about how you got into the business, but were there any personal experiences that set you on the path that you're on, maybe as a kid, that resemble what you do now?
I'll let you take that one first, Matthew. I know you've been around technology for quite some time.
Yeah, it's a bit easier for me because my dad got us a computer back in 80, 84, 85 at home, and that was such a different thing. My dad was a teacher, and so he used that for teaching at school and writing programs for the kids to learn grammar while having fun. And so very early on, I kind of knew that's basically what I wanted to do. So I started writing programs, games as well for my classmates. And then eventually, since I had so many of those, reached out to a company in Paris to get this published in a book, a couple of books actually. And so that's always been my path, really, having people have fun and enjoy their time by programming something that is fun for me, but even more fun because it's going to be used and appreciated, and then move on to the next thing. That's what I've been doing in my professional career as well, building something that is being used and then move on for the next thing, and hopefully do something that's even more efficient and useful as the last one. Always learning from my past experiences.
So would you say your father encouraged you in that direction, or?
My father, no, I would say that he set up the right environment. But I see the same thing with my son, where I never pushed him to do any programming, and yet that's the only thing that he likes to do. And I don't know why, but I think it's because he sees the environment, he sees what it's like, and he tries it, and he feels the same thing that I did. So it's more of a being in the right environment as opposed to being told to try things.
Gotcha. And Mo, you're a businessman, an entrepreneur, started a business at a young age. Anything in your childhood, newspaper delivery route or something that led you down that path?
Yeah, I've just always wanted the independence of being able to build something and solve problems. I've always been interested in that, and it's something that I get energetic about. If I'm working for somebody else, which I've been working for myself for most of my life since I was probably 21, I was still had another job, but by 23, I'd been working for myself full time since then, and haven't worked, well, maybe post acquisition for a little while as we transitioned companies we sold, but I've been working for myself, and I've always been the type of person that if I see something, then I want to take it on and try to put together a team and be able to go solve the problem in the way that I feel it could be solved the best way. So it's just a natural energy. And Matthew and I have been working together now since 2019. We both took some time off for a couple of years after the last company, but he has that same energy around building and execution with technology. So it's been a good match.
Great. The pace of change today with AI is just phenomenal. How do you keep up with and stay current with everything that's going on?
From an AI standpoint, yeah, there's two ways. Like we said earlier, just adopt it for when we need it ourselves. We talk to our customers, we see how they use it. So that's the real life, real world use. I think that the first person to use ChatGPT was my wife when I brought it to her, and I saw how she's using it in a teaching environment. It augmented her the experience in so many ways and getting real-time feedback from her students. So just by looking around and seeing how people use it and try to replicate that. And the other thing is, of course, all those mailing lists that we have to subscribe to, with the evolution of browsers, Ars Technica, and just staying in front of what's happening and keeping an ear on it, but not falling for the hype, just really seeing how it's being used by real people.
Yeah. And I'd say from my view too, is just always staying connected to the customers. And I know Matthew does the same, as we're highly high touch with our customers because that's where the truth is at. At the end of the day, an article is an article. There's a narrative behind it. Somebody's probably selling something, right? Which is fine. But when you talk to the customer, that's when you can identify where the real problems are. So that's the place where I always start. And then just paying attention. I joke about the LinkedIn posts, but I also read them as well, right? Because I want to understand and peel back and try to sort out the truth. Customers, social media, news articles, and you can combine all of it to get to what the current truth is and understand what the reality is.
Yeah, that's a great point. The customer is the reality. That's really where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. And then some of the other stuff might be visionary. So it's good to understand that too. But until you start seeing that meat, and it's not real.
Yeah. Are there any new skills that you're working on, or something that you're thinking, I got to work on this for the future?
Personally or business wise?
Either way.
Personally, It's after going through one company and this one, I think, at least I can say for myself, try to have a little bit more balance with the family. I was in my early 20s and 20s that time, so I have two small kids. Make sure we have time for that. We live by the beach. We spend a lot of time there. We enjoy life. We travel and make sure that that stuff is getting done as with the work that needs to get done as well. So that's a muscle that I've worked on exercising a lot that takes time and focus just like work does as well.
Mathieu?
That's a hard one. I think I'll sound like a middle-age crisis when they say everybody is middle-aged. That's when they start running marathons. And what I found myself is being more focused on health, and the primary goal is really to be more effective. I find that I have more energy if I'm paying more attention to that balance that Mo is alluding to, and doing a lot of runs, trail runs particularly. I found that's given me much more energy and much more focus when I'm at work. And I found myself getting better at it in a way year after year. And it's a good way also to feel confident about yourself as you get a bit older, but at the same time you feel your body is getting stronger as well. It's a good feel. So I draw from that and I continue to learn about, I guess, my physical side so I can be better at working with Weeldi as well.
Gotcha. So if I asked you what you're really passionate about outside of work, it sounds like running's a big factor in your life.
Yeah, nature primarily. So I come from a place that's green all over the place. I come from the French countryside, so I miss that in the San Francisco Bay Area. And anytime I can, I like to escape in nearby mountains and spend some time with my family hiking or trail running. If you do trail running, you can see much more of it. And there's so much to see around here. And it's a nice break. I never think of work when I really am in the moment. And that's very refreshing.
Great. Mo, what would you, if you could go back in time, what would you tell your younger self if you were to give your younger self a little piece of advice or something?
Yeah, I would say things are simpler than you think they are. You have an ability to complicate things when you're looking at them from a distance. There's always somebody told me, an advisor and kind of longtime friend had mentioned to me before, that when you know nothing, everything is very simple. And then the more you learn, it gets really complicated. And then the more you know, then it gets really simple again. And I think just knowing that things are simpler, whether it's starting a business or closing an enterprise customer or selling a business, they're just processes, right? And as you go through them and as you do them, they're not that hard. I think knowing that, and that would instill more confidence and less hesitation early on, maybe allow me to be more aggressive and move faster early on by understanding those things. So that's what I would tell my younger self, or younger anybody getting into probably just about anything in life. Is things just aren't as hard as you make them out to be when you don't know about them.
What a great piece of advice. Yeah. That's fantastic. Mathieu, anything, if you were to reach back and talk to your younger self?
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I was thinking about that. If anything, I would say I would look at how when I speak to my son, the things I tell him off about would be just get out of your computer more and go out more. I would say the same thing to myself. Maybe just socialize much more, spend more time outside, playing, dancing, because when you're young, you're just very focused and driven, and you don't want life to pass you by, and you look back and you want more experiences. So we had some experiences traveling, but I think it's never enough. And I would say even more of that. That's really what matters at the end. Don't be derailed by the grind of the daily work.
So just as we wrap things up, I'm sure people are going to want to get in touch with you and learn more about your firm. I've got online here, for those that are listening and not able to see, a website. But what would you suggest, Mo and Mathieu? How can people learn more?
Yeah, so this looks like a link to the Weeldi recorder, which this will just be a quick overview of that automation studio that I talked about, the no code portion. And I'm not super familiar with, I'm familiar. I don't remember the exact video. There may be some low code stuff that goes into here as well. An even easier thing you can do is just go right to Weeldi.com, and right when you get to the homepage, there's a box and it's called the Weeldi Automation Analyzer. And you can type in any website that you're looking to automate on, and Weeldi does an assessment of that website. It takes anywhere from 60 to 90 seconds, and it'll assess all the technologies and basically spit out a report to you on our ability and confidence level to automate processes on that website. So if you do have something that you're thinking about or something you have a challenge with today and you're not sure if we can handle it, that gives you a quick tool to be able to confirm that we can.
So that's Weeldi, Weeldi, weeldi.com. And if you go right there to the homepage, you're saying you can get an analyzer. So if you're struggling with some billing platform or some other aspect of your business where you're looking to automate access to this portal, you could put that website in, and I guess it pulls in from your experience, having worked on so many different portals. You analyze that portal, or maybe you draw on what you're doing with other clients, and you're able to then provide a detailed report. Is that pretty much what you're describing?
Yeah, that's the gist of it. You'll actually see the detail in the report. So it analyzes the technologies that the website is utilizing, security, the network, et cetera, and will tell you how all that stuff is scored and if we can automate or not. And if there's any areas like performance may be particularly bad in the website, we can still automate on it, but you can see that performance is not good and that have more attempts before you're successful just because of the way that website is served. But it gives you a pretty comprehensive view to be able to see what we can do without having to talk to anybody.
Awesome. This is great. This brings us to the end of another episode, and we'll see you on the next one. But thank you so much. I think this was really informative in terms of providing some great insights, not only into what you do, but also in the state of the market for companies that are looking to automate manual processes, as well as just a little bit about your philosophy on business and a little bit on life too. So this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Mo and Matthew.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Joe.
ETMA Tech Talk podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes research, collective wisdom, and action. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions from the market's top problem solvers, making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.